Hello, I'm Rick O'Shea and I'm the literary curator for this year's UCD Festival. I want to welcome you to this very special edition. This year's festival is called UCD Festival at Home and is a chance for the global UCD community to virtually come together in these unusual times and join us on your smartphone, smart TV or laptop for this free event. We're also very happy to be expanding our digital and worldwide festival audience. Although the annual UCD Festival has had to move online this year, the inspiring, engaging and informative activities of the regular festival remain. It's wonderful to have the global UCD community of students, alumni, future students and friends join us for this virtual conversation and for the events at the UCD Festival at Home. Stay up to date on the full UCD Festival at Home programme at ucd.ie/festival. I hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the UCD Festival Online. I am author, creative writing teacher and beard aficionado Dave Rudden, and I am delighted to be leading a discussion on the topic of what a Master's in Arts brings to your writing, as well as the broader topic of studying writing at third level and beyond, shedding a light on the benefits, the drawbacks and whether it might be right for you. Joining me today is an author whose first novel, The Lost Letters of William Woolf, was described as enchanting, intriguing, and deeply moving by the Irish Times, delightful by the Sunday Times, and was a nomination for Best Newcomer at the 2018 Irish Book Awards, as well as being optioned for television by the production company behind Downton Abbey and Broadchurch. Please give a rousing virtual round of applause for Helen Cullen. Our second guest is the author of When All Is Said, the #1 Irish bestseller and winner of the Irish Book Awards Newcomer of the Year 2019, with upcoming translations into 17, am I getting that right? 17 foreign languages?
17, yes. Brilliant, isn't it?
Which is the language you're most excited about to see?
Well, the Taiwanese was just amazing. It was just so beautiful. The Chinese edition, the image that they used on the front was just so fantastic. And Italy is coming out next week, and it's just got a really, really classy cover as well. Very, very simple. So there's been amazing ones. I could go on. 17 times.
17 more, yeah.
About all the ones I love. The most interesting one to look at, though, was the Hebrew translation.
Oh, wow.
Because, so that was great.
Give it up virtually for Anne Griffin. Thank you both so much for joining me. Helen, to start with you, if you don't mind, you wrote your first draft of The Lost Letters while completing the Guardian University of East Anglia novel writing programme, joining such graduates as Ian McEwan, Kazuo Ishiguro and Anne Enright. Could you kick things off by telling us a little about your decision to pursue that course? What made you take the plunge and why there in particular?
Absolutely. Hi, Dave and Anne. It's so nice to be here chatting with you both. Well, I suppose the course that I chose to do wasn't a full MA programme, and I think partly my decision for choosing to do something a bit more informal was just that I think part of the reason why I'd come to writing so late was that so much of my schooling had always focused on being more clever than creative. And I think that in large ways stopped me writing for a long time because I had this idea that, you really only did things that you knew you could definitely do and that you'd be really good at, and had measured myself in that way, my whole life, and had this idea that, real writers were born and not made, and that if I was meant to be a writer, it would have just somehow happened by magic from when I was a little girl, and I wouldn't have been able to prevent myself from writing. And the idea of going into a sort of a formal academic program to find out whether that was true or not, I found really intimidating. So doing the 6-month course, which was a sort of an extension of the full MA program that you mentioned that Ian McEwan and Kazuo Ishiguro do, it was sort of like an MA light. It was only 6 months. There was no formal accreditation with it, but Michelle Roberts, who had been the professor who was teaching that course in UEA, led a more sort of informal workshop where we followed that sort of collective feedback group model for 6 months with the aim of trying to produce a first draft by the end of it. So it kind of gave that infrastructure and the accountability of being part of a group that took itself seriously, but that didn't have the sort of formal requirements attached to it. So it felt like kind of a nice compromise for me.
Okay, brilliant. And Anne, your first draft of When All Is Said was also written while studying the UCD Creative Writing Masters. Am I right?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I decided if I was going to do this master's in UCD that I was going to like wring every last cent I was spending on it out of it. And so I brought a draft of my novel with me. And so the other students there, my peers, my 12 wonderful friends who sat with me, I bored them to tears with that book. Every time we had to submit something, other than obviously an original short story, I would produce another scene from the book. And it was through them and through the fantastic discussions that we would have and their ideas around what should happen next or why that scene really wasn't working that just brought this book together for me. I wouldn't have been able to have produced the book in the state that it was, which to me was fully formed, unless I had gone to UCD, unless I had listened to the critical analysis of my friends there and of the tutors. The guidance of the tutors was just imperative. And I was so lucky that year that we had Frank McGuinness, Anne Enright, Leah Mills, James Ryan, of course, was the director at the time. And it was fantastic. It gave me such confidence. I cannot tell you. I came to writing late myself. I was 44. I started writing in 2013. So I was full of all of those fears that you were talking about, Helen, about, oh my God, is this the thing I should be doing? And surely, like everybody else who is a writer, I should have been wanting to do this since I was out of nappies, but it wasn't that way for me. It came very, very late. I always loved reading. I worked in Waterstones booksellers in my 20s for 8 years, so books were a part of my life, but the writing of the books was something somebody else did. So in starting writing and then 2 years later saying, okay, I'm going to take this big leap and try this MA. It was terrifying, but it was one of the best things I have ever done, without a shadow of a doubt.
It's such a strange thing where, like, I had that exact same thing growing up where I thought to be a writer you had to be either English or dead. Like I had this, like
as a man.
Yeah, that's the like if you it was so hard for me to like draw a line between someone who loved books and someone who wanted to create to these like venerable, usually old white straight dudes who always made writing out in interviews to be something incredibly special and incredibly powerful, and you had to be one of them to be able to do it. And I think the masters or any course in writing can offer not just actual learning, but also offer that sense of community and that sense of validation that like you deserve to be here.
Yeah. I love that, and I loved the diversity of everybody that sat in that room. There was in terms of age, like we were talking from like 23-year-old right up to mid 60s, and it might have been early 60s. God, I can't remember. I hope I'm not offending anybody. But it was wonderful because that diversity of life experience brought so much to what we were writing and also to what we could offer each other. So I just, I'd walk in to UCD on a Monday morning, mostly terrified because, I never quite felt, God, I'm really up to this, or I'm up to their standard and they're all so much better than me. But by the end of it, I felt that I had earned my stripes. I felt that I had, put the work in and had gained so much from the other people sitting in the room. And it did teach me that writing is about, the hard work and the consistent reading and the taking the criticism and not seeing it as a personal offense, but seeing it as a way to making your work better. So I got really comfortable with that. So I walked in a nervous wreck around that, but I walked out saying, that is exactly what I needed.
Brilliant. And I love that phrase, the diversity of experience. Helen, you have multiple masters, including an MA in Theatre Studies from UCD and an MA in English Literature from Brunel. how do you find those, while not strictly being like creative writing masters, they must feed into your work as well. How does that kind of work with yours?
Oh, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, with the Theatre Studies Masters that I did in UCD, that was still around the time when I was circling around this idea of, wanting to be a writer, and was in love with literature and wanted to understand it, and had this instinct that I wanted to write, but just couldn't imagine myself doing it yet and didn't have a way in. But so I think this sort of appetite for studying literature, especially in the MA, because I hadn't done it for my undergraduate, fed that desire I had to really immerse myself in the world of books and in playwriting and writing, and just deconstructing texts and trying to understand how they're put together, almost like a mechanic, who wants to design cars. So I think it really has helped me in ways that I couldn't have even anticipated at the time, in terms of just learning how to break apart a text and see how it fits together, and helping to identify, why do I love this, or why isn't this working for me? Or when you're reading something, being able to take that macro view and go, oh, hold on, the author's done something really tricksy there. What happened? She's shifted tense there. Something's happened, and it's just, I mean, it sounds mad, but I think when many years later, when I sat down to try writing for the very first time, all of that sort of learning and immersion that I had in the text really stood to me. But I actually went back to do the Masters in Literature after the first book came out. And I think for me, that taking on an MA Literature in the midst of sort of beginning to write full-time was kind of an extension of that philosophy of wanting to keep learning and understanding books, and to keep pushing myself to read outside of what I loved and what felt comfortable to me and what I was most interested in. And I think in many ways, all education, but if you're interested in reading and writing, taking on a course that forces you to extend your literary horizons beyond what naturally, I think, calls you, is so beneficial to you in sort of broadening your writing horizons as well as your reading horizons. So Brilliant. I think it's sort of a lifelong relationship.
I love that idea of lifelong learning. I just think it's fantastic. I've been back to college 4 times, and I keep saying that's the last, not doing it again. But really, it is that there's nothing like your brain expanding and finding out new things, and the way you get so excited about something. So I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I think that I remember seeing, I think it was Patrick Ness give a talk, and someone said, what's your favorite book of yours you've written? And he's like, the next one, because that's the one where I'm going to push myself to be better. And I think the second you stop, and the second you decide that, this book is really good, that's when you stop trying to make your books better. Like I'm always I'm in the middle of copy edits at the minute, and I'm just fighting with every semicolon and comma, and just analyzing and breaking it apart and putting it back together, as you say, Helen. And like, as long as you're doing that, that's good. The second you're like, no, that's great, is the second you stop learning.
Yeah, I can't imagine that ever happening, but I find myself going, woohoo, nailed it. Yeah.
And so people are divided on the topic of studying creative writing. There are so many courses out there. They're at varying lengths and varying levels and varying prices. And I think you don't have to look too far to find that there's as many different opinions on studying creative writing as there are people looking to study it. So some authors have taken stance against creative writing courses. Some swear by them. Can you tell us a little bit about what starting with you, Anne, what like the day-to-day in that master's was like? From creative writing masters can be a little opaque to people who haven't taken the plunge in them. What was it like being on the course? What kind of things were you, what was your kind of schedule like? What kind of topics did you guys focus on?
So, well, one of the things I loved about UCD, now I think it's changed now, but at the time it worked perfectly for me because I had a family and I was living in Mullingar, so I was traveling up every day, 2 days a week to UCD. So I loved the fact that it had a beautiful structure of Monday and Friday. And what really attracted me to the course was it wasn't just looking at your own texts all of the time and workshopping those texts. So it also looked in depth, and we did this with one of Ishiguro's books and various different novels, where we really looked at why this novel works. What is this novel about? What is the author doing here? Why has he or she moved to this scene? So it was a really in-depth look at what makes a novel work. The other thing we did, and at the time I was like, oh, I'm not sure that's something I'd be very good at, was doing a poetry module. And I'm not great at poetry and continue to be not great at poetry. It's just not my thing. But I remember talking to Paul Perry about it, who I is still obviously very involved in the creative writing MA there. And he told me that for prose writers, poetry is really important, because what you're doing is you're concentrating on the sentence, you're concentrating on the rhythm. And so if all you take from this is to pay more attention to the simple sentence or the flow of a paragraph, then you're taking away gold. And so I love that. I love the diversity within that MA. And I think it's still there. And I think it's really, really, really important that you're not just workshopping all the time. It's not just about your own stuff. Obviously, you're giving feedback to other people as well, but it's looking at the masters too. And it's looking at different forms of writing. So I loved that the wideness of that experience that UCD offered to me.
Brilliant. And now what about yourself, Helen? What was the format of the course that you studied?
Well, it's similar to what I'm saying about the workshopping bit, where we looked at our texts and gave each other feedback. Michelle Roberts, who was our mentor, would say, take, for example, if she wanted to discuss point of view or help illustrate a point about how we were using tenses, she would take, examples of texts that she felt really exemplified that part of craft being done excellently, and use that to sort of illustrate what we could be hoping to aim for with our work, and then how we could apply that to our text. But I think to your point about, the debate about whether or not creative writing courses are critical, to people who want to write, it's something that I find myself sort of talking a lot about at events, because a lot of literary events, the people in the audience, many of them are hoping to write and are really interested in understanding your process. And I always get a bit worried that people will think that this is the gateway, to getting published or to getting their books done, when there are as many different ways to write your book and get to that place as there are, stars in the sky. And I think something that's been a really amazing part of the whole process of being published and talking to so many writers about their own journeys has been understanding how different everyone's roots are, and what works for one person doesn't work for the next person. And the only thing that all writers have in common at the end of the day is that they finished a draft of their books. And whether or not they did that with the kind of emotional infrastructure that Anne and I might have, really responded well to by doing a course, or whether they did that by, hiding away in their kitchen, late at night when their families are gone to sleep, different things work for everybody. And it's definitely not the right route and the only route for people, I think, to change their position from where we were, which was, aspiring people who aspired to write and didn't know how to get into it, to having a book on the bookshelves. I'd really worry if people were sitting at home thinking, oh gosh, I have to try and get the money together or the time together, or, be able to access one of these courses, because I don't think it's critical, and I don't think it's for everybody. Everyone has to really work out, what's going to be the right thing for them, I think.
I wholly agree with that. And if I could just come in there on that, what I think is really important is if doing an MA isn't for you, but and I wholly agree that it is not for everybody. It worked for me because my brain works that way. It wants to go to college to learn things. But what I would suggest is, if you are writing, make sure that you have key people that you trust that can read your novel. So what I got from the MA was some really great readers and friends and people who will be honest with me. So it's a writing group. It's a couple of people that you've come across who are also interested in writing. But make sure you have that cohort, people who you can bounce ideas off, and people who you can send small bits of your book to read and to give you that critical, honest feedback. So that more than a qualification, that support around you, I think, is so key, as well as that passion to write.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people that writing can be lonely, but being a writer doesn't have to be. Like, I'm very lucky and privileged that I have a group of, 4 or 5 people who I met when I used to do spoken word and poetry before I did the masters, and I met people in that scene. I edited their work, they edited my work, and I think that's something that I always bang the drum for as well. If somebody is generous enough to edit your book, edit theirs back.
Yeah.
Stand around.
Yeah.
It is amazing how many people they're like, oh, would you mind editing my stuff? And go, sure. And then you go, can you look at mine? And they go, oh, I'm very busy. And you're like,
yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Cool. But you do, like, no one is going to write a book that is going to be loved by everybody. So in a master's, if there's 12 people or 18 people, you might find like 4 or 5 who really gel with your work, and that's no fault of theirs and no fault of yours. But hold on to those people, buy them dinner, like hang on to them, because you'll need them before. It will take a while. It takes a while for anybody to get to the point where they have a professional editor. And I feel even now, it's only the second or third draft I'd ever show a professional editor. Like, I still rely on my friends to be honest with me, but also that nervous first, like slightly buckety draft, I have to give it to my friends first to see before I give it to like somebody scary and professional. We've talked. You guys have both kind of mentioned the community that was there when you were studying. Let's talk a little bit about the role of the teacher within these courses, because I do feel that, like, most creative writing teachers are also authors themselves. And one thing I love, between doing events and attending events, is seeing the different styles each teacher has towards their classes and their events. So I always compare it to music. Whenever I go into schools, I'm like big, loud, messy stadium rock because I'm very loud and shouty. Whereas authors like Deirdre Sullivan, for example, she's like a Damien Rice gig, never raises her voice above a whisper, but everyone's like leaning forward like this. The year that you were there, the 6 months that you were there, tell us a little about the teachers that were there and how they sort of contributed to your process now and to your book.
Well, in my case, I had the same mentor for the whole course, he was this amazing British-French novelist called Michelle Roberts that people might be familiar with. And she was an absolutely incredible mentor. And it's one of the things that I always say about the idea of going into workshops is that so much depends on the chemistry of the group and whoever's leading the group. And Michelle had a really simple rule that sort of charted our course the whole way through the 6 months, which was that any feedback that was given had to be linked to something directly in the text. So there was never any sort of emotional response to what you were writing. And people couldn't say things like, oh, I just didn't get it, or that's not really working for me, or, the sort of soul destroying feedback that's so general that you can't do anything with it, but that completely undermines your confidence. If someone said, oh, that's not working for me, she would say, okay, which line are you referring to? And the person would have to find evidence in the text to support the feedback they were giving. So I think it made us all really great at giving really critical, useful feedback. And it also, to Anne's point earlier, took away that sort of emotional jeopardy of presenting your work to people, because you were always going to leave with a really good understanding of why things were or weren't working that was actually useful for you when it came to redrafting or continuing on. So Michelle was absolutely amazing. And I like Anne was saying, I don't think I ever would have finished that book if I hadn't had her pushing me. She was constantly just reaffirming the idea that, yes, this is difficult. Yes, you may not know where you're going. It doesn't matter if you're not writing chronologically. It doesn't matter if your first drafts are sloppy. Nothing matters. Just you getting to the end of this and just keep going. And so, all these years later, through the writing of my second book and everything that I do, Michelle is still now that person to me who, I give my drafts to and I get her feedback for. And it's been, I think, one of the most valuable relationships in my life, finding that mentor who you could trust with your work in a way that pushed you to be the best writer you could be. So I think, really considering when you're thinking about doing one of these courses, who that teacher is going to be, and if you feel that it's somebody that you're going to connect to, I think is a really critical part of the process, and not just sort of signing up and hoping for the best. I think because so much of your fortune will be linked to your relationship with that mentor. I know, Anne, you had lots of amazing writers on your course, which probably gave you a really diverse experience. I can't even imagine having Anne Enright as my teacher. That's incredible. Yeah. Terrifying and amazing.
She was so kind, very, very kind with her time. But very often in class, you were just you're realizing I am sitting in front of Anne Enright. Anne Enright giving up her time, and you were just more caught up in the kind of the adoration that goes on with Anne. But very, very kind. We had one-to-one tutors, one-to-one sessions with Anne, and she was extremely generous, and really was very good at picking things and suggesting things and say, might you consider? But also, one of the things I loved about the course, and this not only came from Anne, this came from a kind of a rule that I really liked, which was, don't do that. Oh, I don't like that. It's not working for me. It was more, okay, when you wrote this bit, what were you thinking about? So it put the onus on you to actually explain where you were going with it. And so the others in the room could say, you were trying to do that. Okay, well, that didn't come across there. Maybe think about that. So I found that kind of approach really, really helpful. But I think one of the things it also then allowed me and hopefully other people in the room was to know which bits, once we'd done the kind of analysis, which bits we weren't getting rid of. Because I think at points you do have to be very strong about, okay, 7 people in the room don't particularly like this aspect of my book. But we've talked it through. We've ironed out any kind of difficulties there or confusion there might be in the story. But that bit still really matters to me. And if I can just write it a bit better or be just clearer or put in clearer, sharper dialogue to explain where I'm trying to get to with the book, then I'm sticking with that bit. So, I learned to hold on to the things that were essentially central to my story and that weren't up for discussion, really. So it was really good in strengthening my own belief in myself.
Yeah, I think it's one of the first things I think you have to learn when you're getting into writing is the distance between what you think you're writing and what's on the page. So because you have the entire book in your head and because you've lived with these characters for a long time, you can 100% think you have conveyed something, and then when someone comes to it fresh, they're not seeing it. Like I remember with one of my editors, my villains had disappeared from chapter 10 to chapter 20, and he was like, "Where are they, Dave?" And I was like, "They've gone to the shop. they're in a box until I need them." And he was like, "You're going to need to do something." Or like, "I know you think you might have said this, but you haven't quite said it yet, or you haven't said." Do you feel that like that sort of rigorous editing and that discussion kind of prepared you for the professional editing that you get? I think people maybe imagine that you hand in a manuscript and it just goes to print, whereas in actuality, there's a little bit more to it than that.
I don't know, Helen, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, but I think generally sort of learning to have kind of a tough about writing and to not take it personally and be able to have someone point out all of these errors to you or lack of judgment or concentration, or you sometimes, as I'm sure we've all had, you read back to your draft and you think, oh my God, like what was I thinking when I wrote this? I was like, I must have been out of my mind. And I think learning to sort of not feel too precious and sensitive about it by taking part in these workshops, it's just amazing groundwork for when you have someone professionally doing it with you, which isn't that different, except for it's a more intense one-on-one relationship, and you're obviously really going to take seriously all the kind of suggestions and feedback that they have. But I think the more you can take the heat out of the work that you're doing and be able to kind of look at it with a cool eye, I think the better the whole editing process will be for you. So I think all of these workshops are great training for that if you're in the right group of people and it's a safe space.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Yeah, I'd agree absolutely with that. I think it is wonderful learning for what will happen when your baby is assessed by an editor who has loved it enough to buy it. So that's the main thing. They've loved it enough to buy it, and you're ready to do the work. The work is coming. That you may have to grapple with whether you're going to let go of that scene or shift that scene or maybe, I don't know, dampen down that character a little bit. But you're ready for it. So it really does help. I know it helped me greatly. And it is one of the benefits of an MA. That's not to say you're not going to get some of that kind of help with having, as you say, a safe group of people around you who are going to be able to be honest with you. But certainly, yes, it absolutely set me up for understanding what this industry will do with your book, and helped to hone that book into what is, hopefully going to be well received on the shelves and read by people.
Yeah, I remember just when my first book had sold, but before it came out, going and meeting my editor in London, and he was like, "Well, your book's not coming out for 2 years, so we don't have to talk about the edits now." And I was like,
"Edits?
What edits do you want to make?" And he's like, "Oh, we don't need to talk about it now." And there was one, they were all fine, they all made sense, but there was one entire chapter he wanted removed. He said, it's a lovely chapter, it's very, very dark, it's an Empire Strikes Back moment in what should be A New Hope. And I was like, I swear the temperature of the room dropped like 30 degrees. And I was like, how dare you? My agent was like, we don't need to talk about this now. And I went away.
Mad Irishman.
But I went away for a couple of weeks, and eventually I realized he was right, because I couldn't defend it. I wanted it to be there because I liked it, not because it was good or because it deserved. It's a good piece of writing, but it made the rest of the book worse. And I think definitely studying writing at many different levels gets you into that head. So it's not about you. It is about the book. It's about making the book the best book it can be.
Absolutely.
Is there something you wish you had known before starting the course, or maybe something you wish you'd like a prospective student of the course to know before going in?
Wow.
I think
difficult questions now.
Depending on where you are in the process, this is either really inspiring or really depressing. But I think one thing I really learned is that tenacity beats talent 6 days out of 7. And it was really quite remarkable for me in my writing group to see who went on to finish even the drafts of their books. And it wasn't really linked to that kind of raw talent that beamed off, people at the very beginning of that course. And I think that was a really interesting thing to see on roll, is that there were some people who seemed to have this like really incredible magic, like God-given gift and talent to write, and they could produce this amazing prose, but just somehow didn't have the discipline, or didn't have the confidence, or lots of things that stopped them getting it over the line. And then there were other people who worked really systematically and were really dedicated and put in the hours and worked and managed to produce like really beautiful and amazing books at the end of it, even if they felt they had to work harder for the kind of magic stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I think is really important for everyone to remember about that, regardless of how easy or difficult it comes, it will be the hours that you put in will ultimately probably determine your fate.
Yeah.
It's wonderful hearing all of this stuff, because it's reminding me, about all of the key things, because I'm trying to get my second book finished at the minute. So I always find talking to other authors or listening to other authors like this, helps me so much and reminds me that they are the things that matter. And, so thank you, because that's just triggered something in me that, I was having a bad day writing today, and, some like key wise words like that are just going to help me get through the rest of the week. The other thing that always helps me get through when I'm having a hard day, and something I would say to anybody even who is thinking of an MA, is never to stop reading, because what gets me through when I'm having a tough time with a scene, or when I just don't know where I want my character to go next, I just get the book I'm reading and I read for half an hour or something, and somehow it shifts me on. And it's not necessarily that, I found the solution in those pages, but I found a way to relax my brain and allow my brain to stop panicking. So, for example, in the COVID virus times, I've been writing this second novel, and time and again, because we were cut off from so many people, it has been the people that I am reading that have got me through. So always read, keep reading, and it is essential. You can't be a writer. You can't be a good writer without putting in the hard work, like Helen says, and keep and reading.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So tell me, what are you guys reading at the minute? Give us your recommendations.
I am reading Ed O'Loughlin's The Mines of Winter. Absolutely beautiful, about some of the exploration of Antarctica and northern Canada. Beautiful, beautiful long story. It's gorgeous. I'm really enjoying it at the minute.
Brilliant. What about you, Helen?
And I'm just finishing the new Donald Ryan book, which is coming out in August.
Oh,
amazing.
You know, it's
National treasure, Donald Ryan.
I have it sitting there. Yeah. I can't do the camera, but I have it sitting there.
Yeah, so it won't surprise anyone to hear that that's just a total balm for the soul now. So it's out in August, which is when my book is out, and if I had the choice, I would buy Donald. So
no,
if you're only going to buy one book in August, buy Donald.
Your publisher is like, what is she doing? I am. What am I reading? I'm reading How I Live Now by Meg Rossoff. Which is really, really good, very voice-driven, very smart. And I'm revisiting another UCD alumni, Colin Barrett's Young Skins.
Wow.
Which we're doing as the UCD Alumni Book Club book. So I think
good. Wonderful book. Yeah.
I think short story collections are great at the minute because it is. I was hoping to get through all of this talk without getting too into the times in which we live in and stuff, but I think a short story collection is great because you can dip in, get that bite-sized story, and I am finding it a little hard to read full novels because there's so much clamoring for your attention and so much to worry about. But a short story collection is like a little selection box of stories to kind of keep me going.
Yeah. Great.
So we are very nearly out of time. I just have a couple more questions. Events are a huge part of being an author. I think more so now than they have ever have been before. And is that something that was addressed when you guys were studying writing? The sort of all that extra sidereal stuff around the actual. It'd be great. All you had to do was write and hand the book away. But there's some other work involved as well. Was that something that you guys were that they got into? I know with the UCD Masters, we did have a couple of publishers and agents come in and speak to us. But is that something you guys got prepared for in the Masters or in the course, or something that you guys picked up kind of as you wrote?
We didn't have anything on it, but like yourself, Dave, we had people who came in to speak to us and touched on it. But I think it would be a really, really good thing to look at it, because it certainly is kind of shocking when you get out there. You know, you've been working on your own and suddenly there you are in front of an audience and you're talking about yourself. Now, it's absolutely wonderful to be invited anywhere to talk about yourself for 45 minutes. Don't get me wrong. But I suppose not everybody is predisposed to be able to do that and to be able to know, well, how do I work with you know, what if I'm sitting on stage with an writer, somebody amazing? Like, how do you, I was even wondering, like, who reads first? You know, what are the rules to these things? You know, there are so many things like that. But I've enjoyed it, I have to say, all these festivals, and I love getting out to listen to other authors speak, and I have no problem standing up there. But I don't know that everybody would be like that. So yeah, it is something that will be really good. I also think more looking at if your book gets sold, what are the processes it goes through then in terms of editing? I didn't know there was like a standard. Well, at my publishing house, three edit stages. You know, so even though we were prepared for editing because we were doing it every day, I suppose, in class, but it'd be really nice to look at, well, how does the industry actually work? From from the book being bought to when does it actually end up on the bookshelves? Like you were saying, Dave, your editor said so in 2 years' time, and you're kind of going, "Why? What's happening in 2 years? Like, what has to happen in 2 years?"
I was like, do I have to wait 2 years to get paid? I'm really broke. Oh no! But, you're totally right. There's so much around, like the publishing process is a master's in itself. Even if you're not looking to be a publisher, like just to know what to expect. And I know it's different for everybody, and it's different per publisher. But like, there's a lot out there to kind of learn. What about yourself, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on something I've thought about before, which is that I think it would be amazing if we set up some sort of like author buddy system. I talked to my agents about this, that, when they sign like debut authors, that they put them with someone who's a bit further up the road, because I think it kind of happens sort of organically. I mean, the writing community is amazing for people sort of who are further up the road, reaching back to give you a hand and kind of help you get there. But it would just be really nice for, for that to be sort of like a formalized thing where that people could go, I'd really love to, talk to you about your process and how you found all of these things. I think, interestingly, on our workshop course, Michelle, the mentor, sort of banned all talk about publishing agents, what will happen next, because she thought it was just a distraction, and that when you finished your book, then you could start worrying about getting an agent, or what editors you might like to work with, or how you were going to cope with your professional life as an author, but that those sort of things were not anything to be using up your limited mental energy on while you were working through your draft. And I think actually that was sort of good counsel, because it can be really easy, especially as a procrastination tool, to, get kind of obsessed with what you're going to do when you finish. But actually your time is probably better invested in getting your book the best it can be, because actually the rest of it is sort of admin. At that point, once you have your book, sending it out and waiting to see what happens next. It's as much as it feels like the really difficult part, it's actually, I think, the easier part, and the bit that's outside of your control. So we had a kind of an industry ban on talking about things until we were finished, and then we had a few people in to talk to us.
Okay. Yeah.
So that sounds really.
Yeah, I was just saying, and the other thing that now I'm thinking should be banned. But one thing that really, I was like, oh my God, it's like, I have to manage my taxes? How the hell do I do that? VAT?
How does one write an invoice? What, like, to handing them post-its and hoping.
Just this whole element. You're suddenly self-employed, and you're going, God, how do I do this?
I love the idea of a buddy system, though. I think that's really lovely.
Yeah,
I think that, because there's so much generosity, particularly in the Irish writing scene. But it would be nice to kind of formalize it and just be like, this is the person you go to when you ask, how do I write an invoice? How many children is too many children for an event? How many people is like, but yeah, and I think you're right in a way that it can become a big distraction thinking about the market, thinking, I shouldn't write the book of my heart because will it sell? Whereas actually you should just write the book you want to write.
Yeah, no, it's very definitely wise. Very wise. Michelle was right.
Yeah. So finally, guys, and thank you so much for your time and all of your wisdom. What is next? What's next for you guys? Helen, you have a book coming out in August that we're going to buy, as well as Donal Ryan's.
As well as, definitely.
So what date in August?
That would be brilliant. Yeah. So the 20th of August, it's called The Truth Must Dazzle Gradually. And it was interesting to write that book, not in the comfort of my writing group, where I had these amazing people giving me feedback every step of the way. So it was definitely a different experience the second time around. But actually, some of those writers I first met are still my first readers. So, I shared a lot of it with them as I went along. But yeah, so that's coming out in August. So I'm supposed to be writing the third book at the moment. But I think, like everyone, it's quite a bit difficult to focus, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah. And yourself, Anne?
Yes, so working on the second book, and working on edits from the feedback from my editor, and so I have a couple of weeks in which to do that, and hopefully it should be out 2021, but dates are getting shifted around, years are getting shifted around so much that I don't know when it'll come out. Sometime in the future, it'll be out.
Brilliant. Well, we'll look forward to it. Thank you so much once again, Helen Cullen and Anne Griffin. And we hope you guys enjoyed the chat.
It was brilliant.
Thanks, Dave.